If the Bengals beat the Steelers, will Jake woo? Plus, Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers stops by.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. Do you see what I did there?
Oh,
did you see what I did there?
I literally saw it and heard it, which is a reminder that you should subscribe on YouTube or follow wherever you get your podcasts. Woo is going to be that'll be a fun Sunday if you do have to woo. It'd be a good one.
Nothing better than a season sweep of the Pittsburgh Steelers, winning 3 in a row against the Pittsburgh Steelers. All things that would be very fun. We'll get James Rapien's prediction, and he's going to chat with Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers for a couple segments. We'll go over some matchups with Chris as we prepare for Steelers Week Part 2. But first, James, I think we have a couple of orders of business to talk about. And the first was news yesterday from Evan McPherson, who has officially made his preference known that his nickname henceforth shall be Money Mac. And apparently, listening to his answer about this question, people kept yelling it to him, like when he's crossing the street for practice, "Hey, Money Mac!" And it just, according to him, he likes the ring of it, and it stuck. So I think you deserve at the very least, some partial credit for this latching on and taking hold and working its way to the man himself.
Yeah, I'm going to take all the credit. Now, people might not want to give me all the credit, and that's fine. But I'm going to take every damn bit of credit because nobody else was calling him Money Nothing. All right? Nobody. And after training camp practices, after watching this, it might have been OTAs, not even training camp. Guess what? I was like, man, my dude is money. And so whether it's Money Mick, Money Mac, Money McPherson, and that's kind of what I defaulted to, was Money McPherson. But no, that's fine. You know, if it's Money Mac, that's fine. His name isn't Mac, so that part is a little confusing. But you know what? It is what it is, because the money part is money. And there's a reason I always tweet money when he's money with that leg of his. So whatever the case is, I'm taking credit, and that's that. So everybody, there were so many people that were like, oh, I bet James is big mad right now. Why the hell would I be big mad? He didn't go by Evan the Leg or all the crappy nicknames y'all came out with. He went with Money, baby. I'm taking this dub.
People thought I would be upset. I don't care. I'm going to continue to call him Evan McPherson. And here's the thing. I think
money,
you're the only
baby.
person who tried to nickname him, and it won by default. Like, people listen to us. People listen to us that stand outside of Paul Brown Stadium when the players cross the street to practice, and they're like, oh, you know what? James called him Money Mick. I'm going to call him Money Mac and yell it real loud. And that's the only one he's heard. Because didn't we hear that, like, they were calling him Mr. Automatic in the locker room a few weeks ago?
They did after, I think it was after week 1. You know, a couple players called him that. And then, was it Kick Fearson was certainly something that came. So there's a couple. But no, I don't think it was just me. Yeah. Because I know Dan Horde talked to multiple players. I think it's certainly Evan about nicknames, and I think it's come up. Why? Because when you're that damn good, you get a nickname, and he has been that damn good. It's just, he's got a Bengals. He's made the most 50-yard field goals in one season in Bengals history. The dude's a rookie. Drop the mic.
Yeah, we should probably talk about things besides the kicker. I know we have a whole 2 segments here dedicated to the Steelers and the Bengals matchup coming up. One other thing I want to talk about before we talk about this game, Joey B said we don't talk about Stanley Morgan Jr. enough, which is ridiculous for anybody that's been listening to this podcast for a long time. You all know how much I love Stanley Morgan Jr., special teams ace, how when we were doing our roster projections for the last 3 years, at least 2 years, I'm like, yeah, man, Stanley Morgan Jr., he's going to make this team because of special teams. And I don't know if he did actually make the initial 53 this year, but he said that he's everybody on the team's favorite player on the team. So a little shout out for Stanley Morgan from Joey B and from the Locked On Bengals podcast.
You know what's a bummer? Is clearly Joe, like you said, he doesn't listen to Locked On Bengals. So we're going to have to change that. We're going to have to change that a little bit. And meanwhile, my guy, Evan McPherson, probably does. I'm just
You think about the amount of time those two guys might have or want to dedicate to social media. I mean, I don't know. I guess kickers want to stay off social media pretty often too. But when you're as confident and as skilled as Evan McPherson, maybe it's not such a treacherous place to be. Bengals Steelers, James. I know you talked to Chris about the Bengals defense and how the Bengals are going to want to attack the Steelers. And you talked about Deontay Johnson, as did the Bengals today. To me, the biggest thing about this game, just to hit a quick key here before we get out of here for the holiday and have a long weekend, because as a reminder, if you listened yesterday, you already know this, but we're only on 4 episodes this week. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody that celebrates. But a couple quick keys of the game. And the first one is we talked about this a little bit yesterday. The return of TJ Watt is absolutely massive. And I don't think his impact on the Steelers defense can really be overstated. Just their splits with and without him when he's not there. It just makes such a big difference for him to be there or not. So, I mean, do they have a way to handle him? Can Riley Reif hold up? Do they start the game with help for Riley Reif instead of waiting and seeing if they need to make that adjustment like they did against Max Crosby? Those are the questions that I have for this team and for this offense. Is it's going to impact the running game too, not just the passing game. And what kind of game plan will we see from the Bengals, who have kind of put Joe Burrow back into a bit of a game manager role in the last few weeks? It's looked more like the first few weeks of the season than the gunslinging offense. So those two things I think go together to really make me wonder what's this offense going to look like this weekend.
Well, I thought it looked like that against the Raiders, but not against the Browns. But yeah, when you compare this strength for the Steelers, which is going to be their edge pressure, and not really just edge, their pressure, versus the Raiders last week. Yeah, I think it's similar. And you think back to week 3, it wasn't like Joe Burrow threw for 300, 350. So if you're at least pregame putting together a blueprint, it probably is that. It's all about the game script. It's all about getting off to a fast start, avoiding turnovers, which they did for most of that game, even though Burrow did throw the 1 pick. And yeah, you're going to have to hit on an explosive play here or there. But if you can lean on Joe Mixon and you can lean on the defense, you feel pretty good about that. That being said, I don't think you're going to be able to just get away with it that simple. I think the Steelers offense is playing better, not great, but better than what we saw. Having Deontay Johnson out there really changes what they can do, changes their ceiling, because they can push the ball down the field confidently on both sides, with Claypool on one side and Deontay Johnson on the other. So to me, the Bengals, they might have to open it up a bit more, which means how do they find a way to get Jamar Chase going downfield? Because that hasn't happened the past 3 weeks. He's averaging 9.4 yards per reception. And while the Steelers are going to want to try to take him away again at some point, you have to be able to hit on one of these downfield throws. So hopefully they can find the answer there to, one, keep Burrow upright enough to have a couple big downfield throws, because that would be a game changer in a game like this. That could be this ugly AFC North grinded out style game.
Yeah, and the other thing that's going to be an issue is Ben Roethlisberger for the Steelers. When the Bengals are on defense, it's contain Najee Harris, make Ben throw. And part of that containment is also like tackle Najee Harris when the Steelers offense becomes throw the ball to Najee Harris nonstop. And I know that, Deontay Johnson is back. And so that will be a difference from the first time these teams played. But I think that Ben still is bad and is washed and will give the Bengals opportunities to get the ball, have some takeaways, and change the tide of the game. So there's a big wild card there, which is Ben Roethlisberger, because he just hasn't been good this year. And I don't see any reason that should change regardless of Deontay Johnson's presence. James, I know you talked to Chris about a lot of this stuff, a lot of what's going on in Pittsburgh and a lot of this matchup, and we'll get to the crossover coming up next.
But first, I got to tell you about StatHero, because we all play fantasy football, and a lot of us play daily fantasy. And, well, let's be honest, you don't play to lose. Well, if winning feels that good to you, you want to be in a position to win, and you can do that with StatHero. It's the first of its kind. It's daily fantasy sports where you play the house in a head-to-head fantasy matchup, winner take all. I love this because I'm a competitive person. And here's the crazy part. StatHero shows you their lineups before you play, and you can handpick the team that you want to face one-on-one. It is that simple. So why? You're not going to have to face all these, thousands and thousands of experts that do daily fantasy and crunch the numbers like my guy, Jake Liscow. No, you just got to beat the house. Who can't beat the house? You can beat the house right now and sign up for free at stathero.com/lockedon. And again, use the promo code locked on for a 100% deposit match. We're all about free money here on Locked On Bengals. I love it. That free money max sign, right? All you got to do again, stathero.com/locked on, or go to stathero.com. Use the promo code locked on. Get a 100% match on your first deposit. Again, stathero.com/locked on, promo code locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Let's keep things rolling on this Thanksgiving edition of, Bengals Steelers week, a crossover that I know a lot of you look forward to. Chris Carter, James Rapien with you. And Chris, let's dive into the Steelers, because I know some, maybe even my broadcast partner, Jake Liscow, buried Pittsburgh early in the year. And I am never going to make that mistake because I've been there, done that. I've seen it too much. I've seen Big Ben, and I don't care how slow or old he is or what his arm looks like. I'm just not going to bury him because, again, I've seen him for the past decade and a half. They're right in the thick of things in this AFC, this weird clouded AFC. Where is, you think, that this fan base's confidence level right now and where the Steelers are and what they can do potentially moving forward this season?
You'd think after tying the Lions and losing to the Chargers in the way that they did, you'd think that the fan base is like done. But the fans are like all in right now. Especially because they saw Ben throw 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. He hasn't thrown an interception, I think, since he maybe played the Bengals. I think that might have been the last time he threw that, or the Packers. I think it was the Packers. That was the last time he threw a game. But again, that was like week 4 or 5. Like it's been a while. And so the people are excited because they saw the Steelers put up 37 points, I believe it was, last week against the Chargers. And granted, some of that was the defense setting them up with some good turnovers, but still, like, they hadn't put that up when their defense was getting good turnovers earlier this year. So there's excitement for that. There's also excitement for the Steelers getting back guys who are healthy. The Steelers have just been roughshod with injuries. TJ Watt's missed several games. Somehow he's still up there in among the league leaders in sacks. Joe Hayden's missed games. Minka Fitzpatrick on the COVID list. Ben got off the COVID list right before the Chargers game. They've been missing both of their guards at times. They still haven't gotten back their right tackle, who they were hoping to be their run blocker on the edge. It's just been a myriad of just issues. And then, of course, their defensive line has just been decimated, from Stephon Tuitt to Tyson Lulu to Carlos Davis. And the list goes on and on. But through all of that, they're still 5-4-1. Like, people thought that, going into that Chargers game, I was like, there's no way that they win this game. They're too hurt up. Their things are too stacked up against them. They would need the wackiest things in the world to happen for this to win. And it almost happened with the wackiest things in the world, with Cam Hayward with his head batting a ball in the air, and then a blocked punt from Miles Killebrew. And both of those get you points there in the fourth quarter. But there's confidence. There's people that they're confident. But this is what, in the preseason preview, when I talked about this, I was saying, hey, I'm not saying the Steelers are world beaters. All I'm telling y'all is that this division is going to be weird and wacky this year, and the Steelers are going to be right in the mix towards the end. So, I mean, this is when they were losing early, I was like, yeah, but they were missing TJ Watt. They were missing Alex Highsmith. They were missing this guy and that guy. I'm like, if this defense can get healthy, they're one of the best defensive groups in the NFL. The problem is health has been the problem. So it's going to be a lot about this Friday practice report we see on Friday. Who's available? Who's actually going to play in this game? If they get TJ Watt back, I think it does them wonders, because when he plays, they most of the time they win.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about TJ Watt, but I'm going to talk about want to ask you about a guy who didn't play week 3, who I think completely changes the offense, makes life so much easier on Ben Roethlisberger and Najee Harris for that, because I think back to week 3 and it was dump off city in Pittsburgh. It was Najee Harris. He might have had 37 receptions, to be honest with you. It really felt like it was that many. And I think it was like 12 or 14 or something,
It
but it was a
it was
ridiculous number.
It was 14. It was the third most in team history behind 2 Antonio Brown performances. Like, that's
Okay,
ridiculous.
so and I'm a wide receiver guy. I like wide receivers, and I've said it for the past 2 years, and especially now that the drops have cleared up. Deontay Johnson, I think, is wide receiver one, and he's been wide receiver one in Pittsburgh. I love his game. I know the Bengals are very aware of him and the impact he could have this week versus week 3 when he wasn't available due to injury. How different is this offense when Deontay Johnson is out there?
There's confidence from Ben Roethlisberger to throw some of the balls that he used to throw to Antonio Brown. Deontay Johnson was gotten. Remember, he was their third round pick, an early third round pick they got from their trade with to get rid of Antonio Brown. But he was the guy they got him to replace Antonio Brown. They said, hey, we're not saying he's going to be the best receiver in the league, but this guy's a ridiculous route runner. And like you said, in his first couple of years, hands were an issue. But I can tell you, all throughout training camp, when we saw him, when he would be the first one on Heinz Fields, for training camp, and he would just practice this little run in place, and the trainer would throw him a tennis ball, and he have to catch the tennis ball, and he did that every single day, and still at practice, before and after. He's first on, last off. I'm going to work on my ability to catch the ball and run with it, and he's just turned into a star receiver for the Steelers. He is wide receiver one this year. I was a little skeptical because, I saw him working on that. I'm like, okay, let's see if it translates. It's translated. The touchdown catch that he had against the Chargers in the corner of the end zone was just phenomenal because he's not just catching the ball with his hands, he's toe tapping as well now. So he got that knee in on that touchdown, and he's made some plays like that this year. So he's been phenomenal. They got Chase Claypool back. I think that they need to throw him some more inside passes. Pat Freiermuth has come along. There's a chance that this passing offense could figure itself out. They started to in this last game. Ben Roethlisberger spoke Wednesday about, hey, we finally went no huddle in that game, and the offensive line picked up what I was calling, mid-play. So that was the thing that we were scared of, and now we might actually use this again. So now there might be some confidence in the Steelers' offense, whereas for most of the season, there just wasn't any, and rightfully so.
Yeah, and I want to get to the defense, but last thing on the offense. You mentioned the offensive line. It's a young offensive line, especially what we're used to seeing in Pittsburgh. How have they come along? How are they playing right now?
It's a mixed bag. Part of it's also because they're hurt. Kevin Dotson was playing very well at times for them, but then he had an ankle injury that's now put him on the temporary injured reserve. So they brought in J.C. Hassenauer. He had an injury that brought in Joel Haig. So now they're down to a left tackle bumping into left guard. It's been a mixed bag of just injuries and bad things. Kendrick Green is really good as a center when he's mobile, but he still hasn't learned how to snap the ball. Because remember, he was a guard at Illinois. He still hasn't learned how to snap the ball and get his hands up and win battles at the line of scrimmage because he's getting shoved in the backfield. A lot of people are like, oh, he's not strong enough. I'm like, nah, he's plenty strong. It's just that he don't know how to use his hands yet as a center. He needs quicker hands and understand how that works. I think Duke Manyweather, one of the great trainers out there that talks football all the time. He tweeted about this this week, and he said, like, this kid's figuring it out. He just has to get it together, and in time he will. But this group has no problem being physical. They just have problems being coordinated. It can be a mixed bag. But when it comes to protecting Ben Roethlisberger, they've done a much better job as the season has rolled along in doing that. And I think that's the biggest thing here. Now, can they get Najee Harris rolling? We'll see. Najee Harris talks a lot about, like, we asked him about that game with 14 catches, and anytime you ask him about his receptions, he's like, they don't plan to throw to me. It's just a check down. I just catch all the check downs. That's all I'm doing right now. So I'm intrigued to see how that builds. But the offensive line, better than it has been, but the injuries are a big question right now.
Yep, and let's continue with injuries and talk about TJ Watt. He was limited as we record this. It's Wednesday night. He was limited in practice on Wednesday. If you had to guess right now, and again, it's Wednesday night as I ask you this, do you expect him to play? Because if he does play, well, then it's a complete game changer. Deontay Johnson's one thing, but having TJ Watt on defense completely changes how the Bengals offense can operate.
It really does, because he's just that much of a monster out on the edge, and he makes everyone else's job so much easier. It's harder to double team Cam Hayward when you got to double team or keep an eye on TJ Watt. I expect him to play. From Mike Tomlin spoke very confidently when we asked him about the status of him. Minka Fitzpatrick coming off of the COVID-19 list. Joe Hayden's injury, though Joe Hayden didn't practice Wednesday. I get the impression because he's older, they're letting him rest as long as he wants to. But TJ Watt, him being limited is a sign for me that, hey, that means he is going to be coming back this week. You never know, though. There's always odd turns. Sometimes you re-aggravate an injury. But Mike Tomlin's told us on multiple occasions that TJ Watt's one of those guys that he cannot practice all week. And if he says, I'm good to go Sunday, they'll put him in because they have confidence in him. They say he's like an Aaron Donald when it comes to that. So I look at this as a situation where TJ Watt's going to play.
Yeah. And so if he plays, I look at that defense and I look at what the Bengals did week 3. And again, you really can't compare week 3 because it was it feels like ages and ages ago, especially with expectations of both teams and what we were expecting versus now. Because I think the expectations for the Bengals have certainly risen since that game. Defensively, where are they playing well? Where are they not? Because I got to be honest with you. I see 41 against the Chargers. I see a team that roared back. And to me, after all the weirdness that happened on Sunday night, should have won against the Chargers, but the defense couldn't hold up their end of the bargain at the end with the Mike Williams touchdown. Where are they strongest, weakest? How are they playing right now defensively?
Well, again, it comes down to their injuries. I mean, you look at the guys who got beat, on that last touchdown of Mike Williams. Trey Norwood, the 7th-round rookie safety, was in place for Minkah Fitzpatrick. And he had done a solid job most of the game. He just kind of leaned a little bit too much to the inside on one play, and Mike Williams took his head off. And that's where the Steelers hadn't had that much of a problem with Minkah Fitzpatrick. But Steelers fans all year long like, well, Minkah doesn't have 5 picks this season, so maybe he's not as good as we thought. And I'm like, no, the first game he's out, you give up 41 points. You see what he's doing for the rest of the defense. One thing that I pointed out on tape weeks ago was what the Steelers have been doing this year. Instead of just saying, hey, Minkah, go out there and be X factor guy and just fly around the field and make interceptions and play center field, they're having him double where they think that they're weakest. Like against the Raiders, he helped take away Darren Waller. Of course, they got exposed for losing to Henry Ruggs. For the Bengals, he was not helping against Jamar Chase. I believe he was helping against Tyler Boyd, and that's why Jamar Chase started taking their heads off. I would gamble that if he can come off the COVID-19 list in time for this game, his emphasis will be to help with Jamar Chase because he's been a big playmaker for the Bengals this year. So having him back out there, not just his ability to play, but his ability to communicate and keep the whole defense together, that does a lot of wonders. So, again, you look at this Steelers defense, it was really Cam Hayward and a bunch of other guys out there this last week. But when you get a TJ Watt back, I think Alex Highsmith has come along well. They need better production from Devin Bush. Cameron Sutton played well, but when you look at the guys that prop up this defense, it's supreme playmakers like Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt. And when both of those guys are out, it's a problem. So what's going to be the key for this game? Can those guys get healthy, and can they play at 100% or close to 100% level? If they do, I think it's a different defense than what you saw Sunday against the Chargers. But with the Bengals, with their explosive offense, it's going to be about limiting the big plays.
We're going to get back to our interview with Chris Carter, part of our crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Bengals, Locked On Steelers. But I got to tell you about Built Bar. And the reason it's the most wonderful time of the year, it's not just because you can get your hands on these, because you can get your hands on these 365 days a year. You hear about me talk about them all the time, but it's that you're going to save even more money right now if you go to Built.com. You can get 20% off of anything and everything right now at Built.com. All you got to do is use promo code LOCKED20. It is that simple. 20% off, 1/5. Do the math off of this one. Whether you want blueberry muffin, whether you want a little cookies and cream action, mint brownie, high protein, low sugar, low calories, perfect for you. Save money now with all of their limited edition flavors. Plenty of awesomeness, whether it's lemon dip, cheesecake puffs, ruby chocolate puffs, or again, the classic throwback Built Bar. You can get it all right now, 20% off using promo code LOCK20 at Built.com.
If you're listening on Thanksgiving morning, there's football coming up later today. And if you're listening Friday, well, BetOnline still has you covered for all of your football betting needs. So get your fill of turkey and get your fill of betting at betonline.ag, who has you covered all holiday season. They've got more props, odds, and lines than ever before. And they cover not just football, but basketball. If you're upset like me about the Cincinnati Bearcats Arkansas outcome and the way that game finished, well, maybe you like the Bearcats the rest of the way because of how they hung in against 2 top 15 teams this week. BetOnline has you covered. And when you sign up today, we've got a promo code for you. 50% welcome bonus when you sign up, a 50% match on your first deposit with promo code LOCKEDON at betonline.ag. So whether it's pro or college hoops, the NFL, props, games, maybe it's even hockey. like the Canadians that I live with, and they love their hockey. Check it all out at betonline.ag, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports.
James, let's get to these Bengals questions now. Now, the Bengals have had as rocky of as a weird and rocky of a road as the Steelers have had. The Bengals are right with them with just weird things that happened this year. You come out proven that you're a tough team. I think you start 5-2 to start the season. Everything's looking solid, but then you get a couple bad losses. The Jets, the Browns. But bye week hits and you're back against the Raiders. Now, I picked the Bengals to beat the Raiders on the Locked On NFL podcast because even though you guys maybe wear stickers on my face for the Jets loss, thank you Bengals for losing that one. But I look at this team and I see this is still a very young team that's developing its leadership. Where do you see the command of this team coming from? Like who are the guys that garner everyone else around them? Because when I look at this Bengals team, my biggest question is who's the guy that puts the flag in the ground and says, "Follow me, guys. We're gonna be staying focused this week, and it'll keep instead of being up here one week and down here the next, you'll be right in the middle."
It's funny you mentioned that because I think it's full of their locker room's full of guys that make sure that they stay pretty stable and that they're not getting super high after 5-2 or super low after back-to-back losses. And really, when they went to Vegas and how they responded, to me, was a big testament to that. And we'll see if they can keep it rolling this week. But you're right; it's been a lot of up and down and all around. They start 1-0 against the Vikings, then they go to Chicago and lose to a team that they're better than in the Bears. Then they bounce back and they beat the Steelers, a team that I thought they were going to lose to in week 3. And it's just been this, weird up and down season, but they look up and they're 6-4. They're certainly in the hunt for the playoffs, the 5th seed right now. And so to me, it starts with Burrow because he'll get fired up here and there, but he's very, very even keeled. And, if he doesn't play well, right? Let's say he throws 3 picks on Sunday against the Steelers. You know what he's going to say? Well, I didn't play well enough for us to win. And when you do that in the NFL, you're going to get beat. And so then he'll move on to the next game and they'll be motivated to do that. And it isn't that simple, of course, but they have a nice mix of young guys like Burrow and Jamar Chase that stay pretty level-headed. And then veterans that have been there, done that, whether it's a Von Bell, whether it's a DJ Reader, where they've played on playoff teams before and they know what it takes. And they know there's going to be some lows. Mike Hilton is another one that certainly helped them this season. So it's a unique blend of guys. And right now, even when the outside, including people on the Locked On Bengals podcast, I don't know who, Jake or me, when they panic, the Bengals aren't necessarily panicking.
No, I feel you, but that's the important thing here is when you're trying to build this young core, and you got veterans like Vaughn and Mike, but everyone knows Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Joe Mix, like these are the guys that you're leaning on. But speaking of those 3 guys, one thing that I've been really impressed with the Bengals, and Mike Tomlin talked about this in his Tuesday press conference, is how balanced the Bengals are on offense. Joe Mixon can rip your head off if you're not paying attention in the run game, but also Joe Burrow will rip your head off in the pass game by hitting Jamar Chase, and Jamar Chase isn't alone. You still got Tyler Boyd, you still got T. Higgins. This is a group that you have to pay attention on all sides. And the Steelers defense, again, coming off their worst performance since 2013, granted again because of injuries, but still they're well aware of what the Bengals can do. Where do you see the balance leaning for this team moving forward? Do you think this team is going to be a team that leans more on Joe Mixon to close out some games, or is this a team that can just air it out on people, run up the scoreboard with the passing attack?
I think they want to air it out and run up the score, and that includes Mixon, right? But they know that there are going to be weeks, and this is something I think this coaching staff has shown this year in growth for sure. They know there are going to be weeks where they are not going to do that. Last week against the Raiders, why would you drop back 40 times with Yannick Ngakoue on one side, Max Crosby on the other, when you can avoid that? Week 3 against the Steelers is another one where Burrow, they knew they got the lead early and they knew that they didn't need Burrow to carry them, and throw for 350. And so there are weeks like that. And so I think it's going to be a balance. And that doesn't mean that they can't have explosive plays on those weeks when they're banking on Mixon to kind of deliver and carry them offensively. At the same time, they've shown they can win in a variety of ways. And this coaching staff has shown that they can pivot when needed. So looking ahead to Sunday, assuming TJ Watt is out there, you mentioned Alex Highsmith. Obviously, we know what Cam Hayward can do. I look at this Bengals offensive line and I'm like, Okay, well, if you can run, running might be the best option. And even in week 3, Burrow took some big hits there. I know that the Bengals didn't give up a sack, and that sack streak was snapped and all that stuff. He still took some big hits early in that one, and that's when they pivoted. So would not be shocked at all if the Bengals, not conservative, because they're always going to take shots. You have too many weapons not to.
Right.
But I wouldn't be shocked at all if, as this weather changes, it's going to be chilly probably at Paul Brown Stadium on Sunday, if they lean on number 28 a bit more.
Yeah, especially with the Steelers, the giving up the run plays that they had. Now the Steelers, and it's odd when the Steelers focus on it even with their backups, they're like they shut down Nick Chubb against the Browns a few weeks ago, but the week before that they were letting Alex Collins and the Seahawks rip them apart. It's just it's an, and then you play the Lions, and then their run offense picks you apart, and it's just. That's where the interesting thing with the Steelers has been this year is figuring out what they can emphasize on defense if they're ever limited with their roster, like they were against the Bengals when they were missing T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith. All they had was Melvin Ingram, and they don't even have him anymore because he wanted more playing time. But I'm really intrigued about this Bengals defense too because they stuffed the run pretty well. They've been able to make plays. You still got Jesse Bates back there making plays. Where do you see the trajectory for this defense? Are they going to be a turnover creator, as they continue to build chemistry together? Because one thing that Mike Tomlin talked about is that when you look at this team, at this defense, there's a lot of guys who haven't missed a lot of games, and you see the chemistry start to come together on film.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the thing is the sum of all the parts is greater than any individual, and even Jesse Bates, I would say he's probably underachieved up to this point so far this year. And yet you look up and this defense is a big reason why they're 6-4. I was pretty down on them going into that Vegas game, and they responded. The Raiders were 0 for 6 on the first third down, third down opportunities. The game was over when they finally converted a third down, and they had the 2 forced turnovers and late in the fourth quarter that really put the game away. And so, yeah, I think if you painted this picture of what this Bengals defense is going to be. Well, they don't have any superstars. Like Jesse Bates is really good, and I think he's going to be really good the second half of the season. He's not a superstar. Trey Hendrickson's a good pass rusher. He's not a superstar. And Wilson got off to a really good start, but he's kind of tailed off a little bit from a production standpoint. And I don't think he's going to be a superstar. And I'm not being insulting any of these guys. But what I am saying is when the game is on the line, one of them is going to have to make a play. It might not be that same guy every time, but it's going to have to be Bates one week and Hendrickson another, and then it's going to be Wilson. And so who will it be this week? It was Hendrickson and Hubbard last week that really put the game away, along with Eli Apple. So a bunch of Eli Apple, no one would bank on him, but he had a huge interception. So that's the part of it. I think this defense, they're solid everywhere. They're not necessarily great everywhere. They don't get enough heat on opposing quarterbacks, in my opinion, outside of Trey Hendrickson. They don't have a pure edge rusher that's going to give you what you need. They don't have, an Alex Highsmith, so to speak, to complement their version of TJ Watt. And I'm not saying Hendrickson is TJ Watt. Relax,
you're fine. I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So in Hubbard's fine, take him for what he is. And he's on pace to have a career high in sacks, but I just don't think he gets the amount of pressures that you want. So this defense, I think they're good. They're not great. And if they want to be great when it's all said and done, it probably will be that path you mentioned where there's a bunch of turnovers involved.
Last question here, because Steelers fans have always asked me to ask stuff about Mike Hilton. How has he fit in, not just as a player, but in the locker room as you've seen the season go along? I've always loved talking to Mike Hilton. He's very insightful. He thinks about what he says, and he wants to be a leader. He's always the guy that's fighting for his team. How has he fit into what the Bengals have asked him, and then how has he fit in also as like a veteran in the locker room to galvanize guys?
I think he's been great in the locker room. An absolute gem, joy, whatever you want to say, that instantly gives this team in this defense another veteran to lean on, especially when times get tough. Who's been there, who's been into the playoffs, who's been through the AFC North wars that they're about to embark on again on Sunday. And some of these guys have only played the Steelers once or have only gone through the AFC North once. Well, Hilton's done it time and time and time again. So he knows what's coming. So let's start there. Now, as far as a player goes, I think he, much like Bates, would probably say, yeah, the production hasn't been what he wants it to be. And that being said, I thought he was great last week against Hunter Renfrow. Maybe his best game as a Bengal. To me, his best game as a Bengal, made a couple big tackles. Hunter Renfrow, I think, is an underrated slot receiver in this game, and he had in the NFL. He had 5 receptions for 30 yards, and a couple of those were in garbage time where the game was over. So, yeah, I think Hilton gives them a lot, but where you want to see him, and maybe it starts this Sunday, is as a blitzer, make a huge impact. Sack, fumble, strip, tackles for loss, all things that he's really, really good at that we've seen some of, but I think he knows it. He senses it. He's going to have a lot more of that over the next 7 weeks if the Bengals are going to make a playoff run. That's going to do it for today's show. We will be back on Sunday evening. Win, lose, draw. It's Steelers week. And, well, hopefully we got Jake wooing at the end of it. But got to tell you, we are thankful for you. So hopefully you had a wonderful Thanksgiving or are currently having a wonderful Thanksgiving with family, friends, and a lot of great food, including Built Bars. So for Jake Liscow and Chris Carter, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the Locked On Bengals podcast.